Hi, I'm John Jessen, a restorative dentist from Seattle, and this is my assistant Shannon. And today we're going to demonstrate restoration of class 5 lesions on 3 separate patients using entirely flowable composite materials. Our first patient, Leslie, had 2 lesions, one on tooth number 19, which was associated with FURCA, and also a deep lesion on tooth number 20. Our second patient, Neil, had a deep lesion with caries on tooth number 20. And today, our patient, Kathy, has a abrasive lesion associated with gingival recession and toothbrush abrasion that, as you can see, has a conspicuous step between the gingiva and the dentin, which is growing. So even though there is no caries, we need to restore this in order to create function and beauty. So let's get started. The first step in our procedure is to pack cord. We'll be using Ultradense braided O cord and also their cord packer to gently roll the cord into the sulcus. The whole idea here is to move the gingiva away just enough so that we have a working area around which we can place our composite. On our patient Neil, we'll be packing 2 layers of cord because the first layer sunk so deeply into the sulcus that we required a second layer of string to gently, without distortion, retract the tissue and leave it positioned just below the gingival crest. Many times we will need only cord to expose the margin, but in this case we'll need to use an electrosurge. We use a Parkel electrosurge set at on a cut coag mode at about 4.5. And you notice too that the gingiva is not excessively wet. It needs to be a little dry so that you don't have the voltage or spark jump out too extensively. We're only here looking to remove just enough gingiva to expose the string and allow us to see our margin during the procedure. We begin our preparation with a 329 carbide burr. Our objective here is to create a sharp right angle at the gingival line angle. This is very important to our technique because we are utilizing the magic of surface tension to form the material at the end. And what we need is a zone where between the restoration and the root there is a sharp right angle against which the material can flow and not run over that edge. And in great contrast, you see on the enamel side of the preparation we create a long bevel so that the material can bond strongly to the enamel and have a nice transition of color. You can see on our patient Leslie we've created that same preparation design with a very sharp right angle at the gingival, even into the area of the FURCA. And now we'll finish our preparation by using a flame-shaped medium grip diamond burr to form point angles at the gingival. A little push into the corner during the placement of these point angles gives a little natural retention form to the preparation. On our patient Neil, we needed to remove a little bit of caries that remained there, and to do that we used just a simple number 4 round burr. The final phase of our preparation is finishing of the gingival line angle. To do this, we will use a sharp bent angle chisel. We can then remove any unsupported dentin and create that perfect right angle at the gingival, which is so important to our preparation design, and it also creates the strongest possible surface to which we can bond our composite. The next part of our restorative process involves packing more cord, and in this case we're going to use O or Ultradent cord, which expands very nicely to hold the sulcus open, and we're also going to impregnate it with Viscostat to handle any bleeding and to allow the gingiva to contract. As you can see, the placement of the cord is just below the gingival crest, and our intention here is just to flare the gingiva open before we start our bonding process. The next step in our procedure is to clean the preparation as thoroughly as possible. To do this, we will start with Concepsis scrub that has an abrasive material.
Later, we will use Concepsys without it to rehydrate the preparation before bonding. Removal of as much material as possible before we begin our bonding assures the greatest strength and tenacity of our bonding agent. After we finished washing the preparation on our patient Neil, it was clear that we needed to move the gingiva, flare it farther away before we begin our bonding process. And to do this, we apply a third layer of cord. And now we're ready to apply the etchant on our patient Kathy. We begin by placing the etchant as carefully as possible on the enamel only to give it just a little extra time. We're using Ultra Dense Ultra Etch, a very fine product with self-limiting etchant characteristics. Then we continue to apply etchant to the dentin for only about 15 seconds because, as we know, over-etching beyond that time will weaken the dentin and minimize the strength of the bond. And after we wash the etchant thoroughly from the surface, we dry it completely, not only to remove water from the tooth, but to desiccate the cord. And at this point, we apply Concepsys. We apply it with a brush, dry the brush, and brush it again to pick up what we put down and leave a damp surface. And now, here it is, the cord removed, a perfectly clean sulcus. And now we're ready to apply our PEEK adhesive. PEEK is the strongest bonding agent on the market and has fantastic handling characteristics. When we apply it to the surface, we not only coat the dentin and the enamel, but we flood the sulcus because we want the sulcus to be coated. And as we remove our excess and clear it very carefully, not to overblow or over thin, we're now ready to apply our curing light. We use a Velo light. You can see the beautiful focused beam and the easy access. The Velo light has the smallest access head of any on the market and has a beam that produces just exactly the right wavelengths to cure all composites. We start the layup of our restoration by applying a thin coat of flowable resin. Today we're going to use PermaFlow, ultra-dense flowable composite with very low viscosity and wonderful for adapting our first layer. You can see how easily the material flows into the deepest aspects of our preparation, and particularly notice the color, the fact that the material stays white before it's set and allows you to know where it is within the preparation. Before I was introduced to PermaFlow, we used Tetric EvoCeram Flow as our first layer of flowable composite, which I will now demonstrate on our patient Leslie. The thing to remember is to think small and go slow. The material, as you can see, forms itself. The only thing that I do is guide it to the limit of where I want it to go, and when I let go, it smooths itself. I can go all the way to the limit of the margin. It will not overextend and will pull back and form a perfectly smooth surface. This is all dependent on the natural tendency of the material to form a meniscus and have the surface tension smooth and create a most perfect contoured surface. The same holds true on the molar surfaces, and as you can see, the coronal portion is straight, whereas the bottom of the preparation is quite curved. But if you take this Explorer tip and tease the material, joining the coronal portion to the gingival, you can see that the material obeys completely, only flows as far as you want it to go, and adapts perfectly to the natural contours of the tooth, joining the straight surface at the coronal to the curved surface at the gingival. We continue with our second layer on our patient Kathy using PermaFlow. And as you see, the color contrast is so nice, and the viscosity of it allows it to run very neatly and easily into the finest corners of our restoration. And because of the color contrast, we always know where we are in the confines of our preparation. From time to time, we encounter challenges during our layup, which we'll demonstrate on our patient Leslie. If we express an excess amount of composite which extends over the margin, we can regain control by simply sweeping the Explorer down into the dry bonded sulcus to reestablish the contour of the restoration. Now we'll begin the final phase of our layup on our patient Kathy. We'll use a flowable microfill, heliomolar flow, which has optimal characteristics for what we want to do. As you can see, the material is much more viscous than the PermaFlow and has a positive tendency for the formation of a meniscus rather than being so fluid as to create a negative shape on the restoration. The material peaks up so nicely and holds its form to allow us to create a convex surface. If we add slowly, we can generate a further height on the surface without going over the edge and teasing it carefully into position. I might be going a little bit slowly here on this preparation and endeavor not to go over on excess, because if we add too much, we can cause that same problem that we saw before, that we'd have to go backwards and take off a material. But if we add slowly up to the corners, we can continue to maintain that perfect curvature. Slowly adding further increments, tiny drops at a time, allows us to maintain the perfect contour of the restoration. As you can see how beautifully the material floats out and follows the surface beautifully. And at the gingival portion, we come right up to the edge of the margin and stop. But at the cervical portion, we wipe the composite a little bit over onto the enamel to take advantage of the bonded enamel surface. And subsequently, we'll be able to buff that back on our finishing. As we cure this slightly under-contoured layer, we prepare to add our final layer of flowable microfill. Now in this case, we are looking to bring the tooth to the full contour of our final restoration. And at this point, we smooth the composite gently with the Explorer point, and in this case we do go over the edge very slightly on the gingival, because our goal here is to bond to those properly prepared tubules that are at right angles to our margin there, and to allow the meniscus to form a union between the composite and the tooth, which perfectly mimics the shape of enamel, as if the restoration grew onto that surface. And when we apply the Velolite, you will see the perfect curvature, absolutely natural shape of that tooth. We're moving now to our patient Leslie, where we are applying the composite in exactly the same way, and you can see how we wipe gently over that margin to create that shape. And most importantly, you can see the effect of this technique on our ability to generate a perfect furca. As you flow it out, it follows from the straight to the curved. And as you see when we flash the light, there it is, exactly the contour that we want. And now we'll demonstrate the application of that final layer on our patient Neil. And as you can see, we're a bit over contoured there. And oop, there's a little bit of fuzz, but not to worry, because we'll buff that out very easily. Now, in order to preserve the beautiful contour which we have created, we have to somehow fuse the oxygen-inhibited layer. And in order to do that, we apply Deox. This keeps the oxygen off the surface and allows us to make the outer surface mirror hard after we cure it again with the Velolite. Now, if we did not apply this material and you were to go ahead and finishing it without curing that outer layer, you would lose that contour. The abrasive points or whatever finishing instrument you would use would leave a ditch and leave the restoration short of the margin and would not have that beautiful mirror surface. We need to use no rotary instruments or finishing tools to change the contour of this restoration. We only need to remove the excess bonding agent, which you can see has penetrated the sulcus. There's a glaze on that gum that has kept it away from the restoration during its entire application. The only tools we need to use to finish this restoration are mounted abrasive points. We begin with a pointed brownie at the gingival. And if you remember on our patient Neil, we had that bit of excess and fuzz. Well, it was gone in a single stroke. Now, we do not ever traumatize the dentin during finishing, and you see the only time the point touches is in a gentle sweep into the sulcus. And we put a super glaze on the outer surface with a pointed super greenie. And again, we've done no trauma to the gingiva or to the dentin and leave a perfect mirror surface. The restoration is finished, and all we need now to do is remove the retraction cord. And because of our gentle technique, we have no irritation to the gum, no bleeding, and you can see how nicely our gentle electrosurge has removed just enough tissue to allow us to create a perfect restoration and not traumatize the gingiva. Oh, and here we see on our still photograph the invisible gingival margins. As you recall, on our patient Neil, we packed several layers of cord. Looking back, a better alternative would have been to start with a larger piece of ultra-dense braided cord, which adapts easily to the sulcus to fill it up without distorting it. And here you can see the wonderful health of the gingiva, and a smooth margin in our still photograph shows virtually perfect anatomic contour. Our patient Leslie also shows the benefits of our minimally invasive technique. We've generated a perfect anatomic contour to our restoration. As you can see, 20 minutes after we pull the cord, the quality of the finish and the health of the gum. And at 2 weeks, we have regenerated the gingiva and now have perfect health.